part 2 of the video. If you have not seen part 1, then please check the description for that. It will have more information on some pretty big announcements that just happened as I ramble like an idiot for the next little bit of your time. So anyway, let's get on with it. So long story short, what I just talked about in the other video was they just announced that they were going to be showing off the next SAO game at the Fall Festival in Japan at October 1st. That is likely the next holo game, so I'm going to go over some hopes and stuff for the new game. First of all, one of the things I really want them to do and can't imagine them not doing is they're likely going to be changing the skill lists just a little bit. One of the biggest changes that was made between Holo Fragment and this one was the removal of burst attacks and different things, and the risk gauge of which is still kind of in the game, but I'll go more into that in a second. So basically, it all factors in my hopes to the gameplay of this game. As people who are familiar with this know, you've got your sword slashes separated into regular slashes, and then your bread and butter being your sword skills. So what I'm hoping is, we all kind of know that regular slashes do restore your SP. Not very much, but they do nonetheless. I'm hoping that when this new game comes out, it restores more. Because as it is now, it restores 3 to 5 SP per swing, which is all well and good at the start of the game, but late game, that's literally nothing. Look at my SP. I have 1,500 right now. That's not doing me anything. What I want them to do is basically make it restore at least 15. Now that sounds like a lot, but hear me out. If you are, say, dual wielding like I usually do, you have 4 regular swings until you get your flash of being able to use a sword skill with 50%, with 50 less SP than normal. And the reason this is a key is, you know, what's just 15 times 4? That's going to be just over the amount you need to unleash a sword skill. So I'd say that's perfect and not too overpowering. And here's where things get a little more complicated, so try to keep up here. Basically, so if you add this back in, and say add back in the risk meter from the first game, heaven forbid burst attacks. Do not bring back burst attacks. Those things sucked. But basically, I'm going to have to talk about them anyway. What a burst attack was basically these in the first game. However, you had a separate meter aside from your HP, SP, that handled burst attacks. And we still kind of have burst attacks in this one. They're the skill that triggers at the end of a combo, like so. However, you know, this would go up with your risk. And if you had high risk, it would recharge slowly. So you couldn't do regular swings with any damage whatsoever. Or you had damage, but it was next to nothing without your burst gauge. And the way you decreased your burst gauge was with switching and stunning. But switching was such a clunky mess in that game that it wasn't worth it. So if you bring the risk gauge back, with the gameplay as it is now, that could do a lot of different things. Like, take, for example, I was fighting one of the tenant monsters, so the big old tree guys, and they have their arm swing. A good strategy against that is obviously just to parry. However, you can easily, in a matter of seconds, inflict the weak status effect simply by using Veiled Rider and going in with a Pierce skill. No questions asked, it will inflict weak. And with the weak gauge and the risk gauge, say if they were to bring that back, inflicting weak would not only decrease risk, and the lower you kept your risk for playing well, it rewarded the player. Your burst gauge would go back up faster, your SP would charge back up faster. So, say if you wanted that SP recharge by 15 per slash, like I mentioned earlier, especially when you're factoring things like Tragic End that are designed to chain into these, with all of this, could be some heavy rewards for playing well. It would keep your combo meter up, it will keep your hit gauge up, and it will keep your SP up if you're playing well, to reward the player for actually learning the game. Especially if you're talking about realization after from the Warriors of the Sky update and further on, that is how you make a good RPG. Like, this is honestly one of my favorite things to play, not even because I'm an SAO fan, just because I love this gameplay. Anyway, all of that aside, the other thing on my hopes list for them to do is armor sets. Those of you who know this game know full well at the start of this game, the armor was bare. There was like maybe 5 armor sets, and they all looked borderline the same. Borderline the same with just stupid recolors and this. Like, both of these armor sets that my partner here have are the astral armors that you can get from Enigma orders at the moment, with the exception of my pants. I don't have those yet. But yeah, just more armor sets. Because literally, there was nothing. Even Fragment had more than this. Moving on now. Point 3 I want them to make is, I brushed on it a little bit earlier, but I'm going to elaborate here after I kill this, not that, mammoth that is getting in the way of my recording. But the other point I'm going to make is the skills. There are a lot of these on this list that need some serious work. I'm not saying I want, like, most of these I'm still pretty okay with, but there are certain ones that just have their issues. Case in point, the double jump skill. This thing needs to be passive. If you've watched my videos, you have heard me complain the crap out of this. You jump, you have to have your palette open or on a shortcut, and then push the appropriate button, in this case circle, to do it again. Yeah, it uses 50 SP, I can see why they don't, but late game 50 should be nothing to you. Come on. Similar skill that falls into the same thing are ones like SP regen, and it restores 600 of your SP in just a little, I think it's 3 minutes? But the problem with this skill isn't so much, it should be passive. Like, I'm gonna level with you here. Basically, the problem with this skill isn't so much that, obviously, there's no downsides. It's just an SP regen increase. And for 3 minutes, in 3 minutes, it will restore 600 of your SP. Good. However, considering it costs no SP to use, what the heck? And its recast is done the moment it wears off. So at that point, you're just immediately going to reactivate it. So why isn't it passive? I can understand them making things like Soulful Stand and Caged Soul not passive, because they're a temporary SP increasement. So those are going to wear off. But something that I'm just going to immediately turn back on because its recast is exactly the same as its active time, what's the point? And there's a couple others I could go over that just have the same thing, like this one. I get why this one's like that. The HP regen 100% in 30 seconds is crazy. And while it is totally nerfed in that spectrum in the player versus player modes, this game has no standard HP regen of any sort. Not by level, at least there could be. Pack 3 is not over in the States at the time of this recording. So hopefully they add some form of regular HP regen. Hollow Fragment had it, and yes, you did start at level 100 with a cap of 300 in that game and went from floor 76 to 100. So it was kind of a late game, end game kind of thing. So whatever. But obviously, that aside, there's just, you know, things they could improve upon. I'm not saying this game is perfect. It is one of my favorite games. I have almost 340 hours on it, for goodness sake. But, yeah. So, long story short, some improvements on the battle system, which is already next to flawless. Just take what was good from Fragment and Realization. More so Realization than Fragment. Literally, again, all I want from Fragment is that risk gauge to reward the player further without bringing back burst attacks. Bandai Namco, please watch my video and like. Armor sets and those skills being changed to passive, for goodness sake. And I'm never going to complain about more sword skills. I love me some more sword skills. Oh, speaking of sword skills, last thing I want then is, as a hope, is multi-directional shortcuts. These are your shortcuts if you haven't played this game. I'm imagining most of you watching this have played these, or at least do play this. These are your best friend. A lot of people make builds that require you using these for some of your combos, but with how this game works, it is better to just have them on your shortcuts. Double tapping for me will activate Blazing Spin with a single one of Nightmare Rain. And especially with the inclusion of enemies in the first update, major update for Shrine Maiden of the Abyss, they had enemies that could finally hit you with a confusion status effect, which reversed your controls. That did literally nothing. Most of your sword skills will lock onto an enemy and target the nearest one, even without you being locked on. So your character would automatically turn to hit this enemy. But even with your controls reversed, because it doesn't matter which way you tap these, there was no consequence. I could be pushing left even though this shows right and still activate Nightmare Rain and Blazing Spin. So if they were to give you, let alone because if you're looking at the single-handed sword, it has more skills available to it than there are shortcuts. So if you were to make multi-directional shortcuts, so double tapping left or just tapping left will give me something different than tapping right. That will actively put in the player's head that they need to be aware when they're in this situation, so they're not using a skill they don't want to. That is just something that needs to be there, and I was really hoping they would. But yeah, that's more or less hopefully the ending of my rambling. So, I mean, I guess Bandai Namco, please bring us Pack 3, Those Who Resist God, as soon as you can. I'm not going anywhere. Most of the dedicated players of this game aren't going anywhere. I mean, I could go on a whole nother rant about how they could improve the PvP, because let me get level with you. I love the PvP mode, but you're waiting on that unless you have somebody you know that's going to play with you, because you like call them up and be like, yo, dude, let's do this. You're not going to find anyone in those rooms right now. It's almost always borderline empty. So yeah, with all of that said, one last time, just for a final roundup, improvements on what worked to the battle system, more armors, turning skills passive, multi-directional sword skills, etc., etc. Everything will be fantastic. So keep it real, and Lord Exas out.